Hey everyone, my name is Charles Werner with Drone Responders. Welcome to today's webinar with the FAA. We have a cast of members of the FAA to talk about different topics. Give us a couple minutes for everybody to load in, and then we'll get started. And just so the other panelists know, we also take registrations, so they're in place, and this is recorded. So we actually have about 400 registered for these webinars. So a lot of them come back and get the recordings at a later time. We'll wait one more minute to let everybody get in. I still see people coming in, and then we'll get started. Thank you for your patience. Okay, in the interest of time, it's now 4:02 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks all of you for joining. My name is Charles Werner with Drone Responders. We're very excited today to bring in a cast of great team from the FAA. Mike O'Shea cannot be here today, so in his stead, we have John Meehan, the infamous Dr. No, who is going to lead us down the path of today's conversation. So, John, take it away. John, we've lost your audio. So I think that means that John is going to log out and log back in again. So as technology has control of us these days, we will wait for John to come back in and lead us down our discussions for today. So everybody hang in there with us. We're going to be right back here as soon as John can get back in online. And here he comes.
Well, always an exciting day here at the FAA. Is it my turn, Charles?
Yes, as I was saying, we are now being led by John Meehan, and I don't know if you heard me or not say the infamous Dr. No, and there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that later in the joke, but he will lead us today. And John, take it away.
All right, thank you, Charles. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here again, and as Charles mentioned, I'm filling in. I have some big shoes to fill with Mike O'Shea, who's taking some time off right now, and we wish Mike and everybody have a good time while he's off here. So I'll try to fill in for him. So today.
We lost you again. Are you on a VPN or something, you think? Okay. Sorry, everyone, for the delay. As you can see, technology has its control, and we will continue to play mercy to it. I will tell you a little bit about what's happening while John's trying to come back on today. We're going to be talking about the Wildfire waiver and some of the other new waivers that are out there, and we'll try again. John?
Hey, it's a character building day, I think. So we shall adapt and overcome, right? This is the public safety way. Yeah, so most of you know me. I'm John Meehan. I work in the FAA safety team, and I'm part of the outreach that we do on UAS information. I work hand in hand with Mike O'Shea and Charles quite a bit. Today, we have a nice panel for you of different lines of business. We're going to open up with a couple of colleagues from our air traffic organization, Myrna Meyer and Mike Sheldon. They're from the Air Traffic Organization, and they're going to talk to you about the red flag waiver concept. And if you have any particular questions about air traffic, hopefully they'll do their best to be able to answer that, or at least point you in the right direction. And following them will be my colleague, Chris Doherty. Chris is in our waiver team and special projects. He's in flight standards as well. And Chris and I interact almost daily, much probably to his chagrin, but he's very knowledgeable, and hopefully you'll get a lot of information about that. And then when they're done, then we'll pass it over to Charles for a few words of wisdom and some pertinent topics, and then we'll take it from there. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to my colleague, Myrna Meyer, and she will talk to you about the red flag waiver. So Myrna, over to you.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here with you, and hopefully we can provide a lot of good information for you to help you out in your SGI process. And we're going to talk specifically today about the red flags. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. I have a nice short presentation for you guys. And I hope you guys could all see it.
Yeah, you might want to go into from beginning on the slideshow, but your screen is visible.
Okay, it is. Awesome. So this is the beginning, and we are the SOSC System Operations Support Center. And if any of you that are law enforcement, even fire departments, we usually deal with all law enforcement agencies, help them get their SGI waivers taken care of if they need to go into a Tier 4 or an area that's in the lands over that you need to go over the altitude that's in lands. We try to do whatever we can to help the emergency first responders out as much as we can. So that's what we do here at the SOSC, and it's a small group of 7. We operate from 6 a.m. until 12 midnight Eastern time, but then after that we're on call. So today we're going to talk specifically about the red flag warnings and what is a red flag warning. Red flag warnings, as you see here, they are issued by the National Weather Service. They have what is called a fire weather watch or a red flag warning. A weather watch is simply just that, a watch, and the potential exists for the fire conditions. A red flag warning is saying that all the elements needed combined, such as dry fuel, weather conditions, support extreme danger of fire. So these products are written for land and fire managers to highlight the increased fire danger. It's specifically really for federal land managers. So each National Weather Service office creates the local criteria for fire weather watches and red flag warnings. And as I said earlier, fire weather watch is issued up to 72 hours before the above conditions are expected to occur. Red flag warnings are issued within the conditions when the conditions above are expected to occur or are occurring within the 24-hour time period. So I pulled this up from the National Weather Service, and these are the maps. They have several different maps to provide the warning. I'm not going to go into all the details of what they are, but I just wanted to point these out, that they do have extensive research and warning to get everybody prepared and be able to give the necessary warnings, especially now as we're heading into the TFR season. This is our first year that the SOSC is really being involved with the red flag warning. So hopefully, as we go along and it's developed more, then we can give you more information. But so far, this is what we have. The red flag warnings are usually only issued during the spring and fall for fire season. That's February 15th through April 30th. And again, in October 1st to December 15th. And when warnings are issued, officials know to curtail planned burns and to be on the lookout for wildfires. Red flag warnings are issued again by the National Weather Service. Again, this is just basically going over is when the conditions exist. These are the maps that you can find in the National Weather Service website. And then I believe I have another map here as well that shows you the significant wildfire potentials for 2023. So they compile all the data and try to educate people as much as possible for to see if they can mitigate the potential for big fire areas. This is just one of the TFRs that we've issued in the past. As you can see, it's November 2018, and that was Paradise, California. And we also helped in that process to try to get everybody, in there safe as we can, and get them up and going in a safe manner. I pulled this from, there is a fire TFR map that is, I believe, by the Geological Survey, and you can find all the different TFRs in the fire areas in this map. It's a good resource to have, especially for anyone that's intending to go into that area there. This is the example of a published FR-BVLOS TFR. Now the FR-BVLOS, the Beyond Visual Line of Sight, those are the NOTAMs that we issue when I think most of you are familiar, emergency responders will call us and they say they cannot maintain meet the regulations to maintain the visual line of sight with the UAS. In that case, when something like that happens, then a TFR needs to be issued for safety reason. So we have to issue the TFR. And the one thing that I want everyone to remember, that when a TFR is issued and we close down an airspace, that means even the requester that requested the TFR and we issued it needs an SGI permission to get into their own TFR. I know it sounds kind of a little silly, but unfortunately that's how it is. Those are the regs right now. And that's what we have to go by. So if you issue a TFR for a visual line of sight, if you want to fly in it with your UAS, you also need to go and request an SGI from our office to give you permission to go in there. We will take care of all the coordination with the air traffic facilities. And every now and then, depending on the air traffic facility, they might need you to call them, contact them on mission complete. They would like to know that, as you can understand, to get that, check that off their books, because then until they know that the mission is complete, they'll keep all the air traffic specialists looking for any UAS. So this is the map that we will send along when somebody does request a visual, beyond visual line of sight TFR. We will send the previous text that we showed you as an example, along with the coordinating map. We'll issue the map, the graphics, so everybody has an idea of where it's going. It goes to the requester, so whether it's the fire department, police department, and every now and then we'll send it to the air traffic facility in case they need it to provide a visual aid for the air traffic specialists, controllers rather. So the SGI waiver. SGI waivers, again, as I was saying earlier, if you do request a TFR, or even if it wasn't a TFR that you requested and there is a TFR in there, you need to call us and get the SGI waiver. The process for that is, there's twofold. You could either, if it's an emergency and it's ongoing, you can call us, we'll get you up and running within a few minutes. Or if it's within a few hours or from one day to the next, you can get the SGI form, send it in to us, and just email it back to us if you have it, or if you get it from us. The one thing that I do recommend, that if you do send an SGI request, let's say for the next day or for 5 hours from the time you send it, follow up with a phone call. Unless it's in the middle of the night, then we'll see it as soon as we get in the morning. We go through all our emails and make sure we follow up with everything that needs to be taken care of. Again, so the SGI process is pretty simple. If you have an emergency, call us. We'll get you up and running in a few minutes. And we'll say, hey, whenever you get back to the office, whenever you have a chance, send us the SGI form, complete it, and we'll send it back to you. That way you have it for your records. And that is it for the SGI. Again, operations that may be considered emergency situations are firefighting, including the wildfire suppression and red flag warnings, monitoring area that I mentioned before. Search and rescue is another big one that we have to do. And sometimes every now and then, because the area is so big and either the fire department or police department cannot keep a visual line of sight with the UAS, we might have to issue an accompanying TFR with that. Law enforcement activities such as high risk search warrants, we help with that as well. The same thing with utilities. For example, in Florida, when the hurricane last year, they had to go, Florida Power and Light had to monitor the wires from above. We were pretty active in helping out, and they were pretty active, as you can imagine, going through all the different lines, making sure that everything was up and running. The SGI waiver application, you can find it on the FAA emergency website, SGI emergency site. And that is for, obviously, for existing Part 107 with current certificates, COA certificates, certificate of authorization, that's what COA is. And if you don't have a COA, you can always give us a call again, and we'll help you get up and running. There are two ways that you can contact us. You can either contact us via phone, like I said earlier, and our phone number is 202-267-8276, or via email. You can send that form in, and it is that email that you see up there, 9-ATOR-HQ-SOSC@FAA.gov. We're pretty good at getting back to everybody in appropriate manner. The only time that we will say we will get you the SGI form, return it if you send it to us a day in advance, or let's say 2 days in advance, and there's a high-risk search warrant being planned. We probably won't send it until the day prior to, or the shift prior to. And that is because we want to make sure that we contact and inform the air traffic controller that's going to be on duty as much as possible. Because as you know, air traffic controllers work in shifts. So we don't want it to get lost in the shuffle from shift to shift and not being passed down. And the next thing you know, you have a controller in air traffic facility calling the den and saying, well, there's a UAS, it's not authorized there. We work really closely with the den guys, and actually, if they do see anything like that, they'll turn around to us and say, did you guys approve a waiver? And we'll either say yes or no. If the waiver wasn't approved, then that's a different story. They'll follow up on that. But again, it's pretty simple for us to just get you a waiver if you need it. This is the waiver form. If your guys are not familiar with it, again, you could find it in that website I gave you earlier. Just fill it in, send it back to us. And again, we're pretty quick on trying to get you all up and running as much as we can. Obviously, if there are circumstances that, you know, we have to deal with either the Secret Service or FBI, and if they say no and they own the TFR or a prohibited area, then that's a different story. And we'll try our best to get you up and going. And that's all I have.
All right. Well, we do have a bunch of questions for you, Myrna, and I'm going to ask while I'm about to ask those questions, if my colleague Skip, if you could paste the link into the chat for everyone. It's a web page where you can go to and get a lot of the information that Myrna was just talking about as far as the SGI process. We were anticipating that one. All right.
Okay,
so
great.
Yeah. So a bunch of questions came in. I think one of the interesting ones, and I'm going to call it more of a philosophical kind of a question, but these fire warnings, sometimes they'll come out when there's not an actual fire, but the fire is anticipated. And the question is, do you anticipate TFRs being issued during these warnings before an actual fire is underway, so that maybe the fire teams can go in and do a recon of the area? Anything like that, or is the TFR only going to go up when there's an active fire?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's only going to go up when it's an active fire, and they're pretty quick on getting a TFR up and going when one is needed. The same thing, actually, as a matter of fact, for any TFR, it could be VIP movement TFR or any TFR. We rarely have an insight as to when it's coming. Sometimes I've gotten situations where somebody asked for, let's say, a concert in Miami, contacts us 2 weeks before and saying that there's going to be a TFR. Well, I couldn't tell you that. The TFR process goes through it has to be a credible, what is this here, Mike?
Yeah,
It
but
has to-
well, for these TFRs, so actually, I one more thing on that is that's correct. We wouldn't put up a fire TFR. However, that we would put up a BVLOS TFR for access to the airspace prior to any fires. And that's the point. To be able to get the BVLOS TFR 91-137A1, which is the most, it's the most restrictive TFR we have.
Mhm.
We would put that up so that the drone and the fire teams could go in there ahead of a fire and see what they could do to probably to mitigate fire damages. Hopefully get in there before the fire becomes out of control. There would not be a TFR for the fire itself, but we would put up a 91-137A1 for a BVLOS so that they could get in there and access it.
Mhm.
Does that
Okay, and
answer your
no, that's a great one. And while we're talking about that, I always point folks back to that we do have an advisory circular 91-63 Delta that talks about temporary flight restrictions, the process of how you go about asking one. So I always encourage you to do take a look at that. It might save you some time as well. One of the questions that came in also was, tell us more about this BVLOS TFR, and like in that particular case where there was one issued for a chemical spill. Is that is that a waiver for them? They can actually go if they get approval to go in, right? They have to get approval to go in, but can they operate truly beyond visual line of sight without a visual observer? And
Let me take that.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. Let me just jump in on that. As far as the beyond visual line of sight, TFR is in fact for the drone to have access to that area. So in fact, just to get into the weeds a minute here, it's the 91-137 is a hazard TFR, and the hazard in this case would be the chemical spill, for instance. So we've shut down that airspace and let the drones operate outside of beyond visual line of sight, and that's the purpose of the TFR. The TFR is to make sure that no other aircraft is in that airspace, so that we can assure separation. And the TFR itself is for those drone operators to get in there and do whatever it is they need to do.
great. Yeah, that's a great explanation. So another the first responders always want to save time and do two birds with one stone. So can I call you and ask for a TFR and then break? And can you also give me an SGI into the TFR? Can they do both in the same phone call?
They generally can, and they do.
Mhm.
But we also need to get all the information to make sure that it's legit and all that good stuff. But at this point, we have a pretty good relationship with many of the different first responder groups. So we know who's legit and who's not. But yeah, we're not looking to keep people out for a legitimate need. For a legitimate need, we want to get them in as quickly as possible.
And the other thing is the TFR, it's a little bit lengthier to put out because of the process of actually restricting an airspace is a little bit lengthier for us to process, for it to go into the system, and also for the coordination that has to get done for air traffic safety.
Right,
in
sure,
fact,
because
do it
the approach
remarkably
control has to
quickly.
know as well.
Yeah,
right?
we do it
So-
very quickly.
Yeah, no, it's great. A lot of people do need to know so they can vector man traffic out of the way as well. So that's good. Another question that I had for you is, hey, how far in advance can we call you or can a proponent call you in anticipation of a red flag waiver? How far in advance?
The way it's explained to me is that it needs to have a red flag warning come up. Once a red flag warning is up, at that point we can start issuing it. We would not be authorized to issue the BVLOS TFRs until there's a red flag warning for that area. Once it's
Gotcha.
up, we can go ahead and do it.
Gotcha.
And that's
Okay.
within a few minutes.
Right.
All right, great. I don't have any more questions on my end, Charles. I saw your hand up. You got any for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Mike, you were talking about, I think the original work on this was such that the BVLOS waivers could be done so reconnaissance could be done before fires have actually been detected. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. And first of all, I just want to always comment about how great the SOSC is. They're always responsive to us. And I can tell you that public safety is giving you a thumbs up all the time. Thanks for all the stuff that you all do at the SOSC.
We always appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Charles.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, so Charles, one other thing, my colleague Skip posted the link. It looks like it only went to the hosts and panelists. If you could put that for everyone, that would be great. And then that'll help everyone in the audience find out how to get a hold of them. So I think Myrna, we're done with your portion. Thank you very much for participating and giving us this information. I'm sure we know how to get a hold of you if we need to. So thanks
Yes.
very much.
Anytime.
All right. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Next up is my esteemed colleague from Flight Standards, Chris Doherty. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then Chris also has some information he's going to talk about obstruction shielding. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks. And my name is Chris Doherty, and I work all the complex waivers for the Part 107 waiver team. And we come up with various ways to issue waivers to people on various types of operations. I work hand in hand with Michael Shea and John Meehan when we come across a first responder or fire department waiver and hand it over to them to make sure that everybody understands what's available to them, especially if they don't meet the Part 107 guidelines that we put out. But John asked me here today to talk about a shielded waiver, what we're calling a shielded waiver. And we have started issuing what we call shielded waivers for beyond visual line of sight operations. We have a lot of different styles of this shielded waiver. And I want to, I'll just share you, give you the graphic real quick of what we're talking about. And so it says basic masking operations, and this is a kind of an older graphic that we had to, we didn't know whether we were going to call it shielding or masking. We went with shielded because there was another connotation for masking. And what we're referring to is that we're issuing beyond visual line of sight operation waivers without the use of a VO, as long as the drone is remains within 50 feet above the ground level or within 50 feet of a structure. So we determined with some risk management planning and panels that really aircraft shouldn't be operating within 50 feet of anything out there. And if they are, we've got bigger problems than just the drone flying in that area. And so with that radius area around any type, this particular graphic was done for infrastructure inspection for power lines, but it basically conveys the same message, that if you can keep the drone within 50 feet of the structure, that we will allow visual line of sight operations. Now, there's one caveat to that, and that caveat is that you have to be able to receive ADS-B signals, and usually that's through both frequencies on that. But a lot of the drones nowadays are equipped with ADS-B receivers that will receive on both of those frequencies. So we're happy about that. But that way, that gives them enough, that ADS-BN is enough mitigation to satisfy us. A lot of times when we're dealing with aircraft that are down that low, they're usually going to have ADS-B in particular areas. Now, we're not talking about agricultural areas, because we know the ag guys are not going to have ADS-B, but what we were referring to is the light flight helicopters and a lot of aircraft that are operating within a load sea veil and so forth. So we're pretty happy with that, with the data that we've seen, and we've started issuing these waivers. There are a lot of varieties of these waivers depending upon the detect and avoid strategies that are out there. Some places use radar, acoustic, visual. There's a lot of different variations on that theme, but that's what we're going with at the moment. Let me stop this sharing. And so that I know there might be some questions on that, and I know that's really kind of in a nutshell what we're doing for shielding. Now, go ahead, John. I know you had a couple of questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious question is, how do I get one? Right. So I'm sure all the folks who are listening in today say, hey, this sounds great. How do I go about and get one? Okay.
So where we work, and we have the waivers. the number one reason you don't get a waiver is if you go into drone zone and you apply for a waiver, is that you're not presenting all of the information requested by the waiver safety evaluation guidelines, the WSEGs. And those are available online on FAA.gov/UAS, or you can get them from the UAS help desk. They'll give you a link. But that's the number one reason, especially for the first responders, police department, fire, all the different governmental agencies that apply for a waiver. They just apply for a waiver and tell us what it's for, but we still are obligated to go to these waiver safety guidelines. And it talks about your training, talks about some of your mitigations, your equipment, and some of the things that you want to do. A lot of basic information. And if we don't have those answers, we have no other recourse but to disapprove it and kick it back to you.
So I think this is a good time to, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think it's a good time to kind of point out to the audience that what we're talking about is a waiver to 107.31, which is a Part 107 waiver, visual line of sight. And what Chris is referring to is the waiver safety explanation guidelines that are on the website, and you would scroll down to 107.31 and you would answer those questions and be detailed. Now, if you're flying as a public aircraft under a public aircraft COA, you're flying under Part 91, and that would be another process, a separate process under Part 91, and that would probably require other conversations. Is that a good explanation, Chris?
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't put that in there, but yes, it is a waiver. It is this masking or shielding waiver is a waiver for 107.31 under Part 107. Which
a rose by any other name is still a rose, you know. So it's still a waiver to the fundamental requirement of visual line of sight. That is there. Chris, how long does it take generally for someone to get a 107.31 waiver?
Well, technically, we have like 90 days to get you a waiver if you apply for it or get you an answer and work it. But we've been keeping it somewhere around 30 days or under. There's only 5 of us on the team. And at any one point, there may be 1 or 2 working those based on other projects. So we keep it under 30 days, try to keep it under 30 days. That's our goal.
And Chris, this is a one-time waiver. You don't have to keep doing it every time you get a flight, correct?
That's right. We issue these waivers for 4 years. So once you get a basic shielding waiver, it'll be issued for 4 years. Follow those guidelines and you'll be good.
One other thing I'd like to point out to the audience is that you can go to a webpage called 107 Waivers Issued, and there's a search field in there, and you can type in 107.31 and it will pop up all of the entities that got a waiver to Part 107.31. And I would encourage you to scroll through there, and if you see an entity that you know about or know them, reach out to them and talk to them before you submit your waiver application. Might help you there. Now, those waivers will show you what the FAA issued. They will not show you what the applicant put in their application as far as their mitigations and such. So I don't see any more questions. Chris, I guess one more that comes to my mind. Are you seeing any particular technologies that applicants are starting to put in that look very interesting to the FAA and make your team more comfortable with approving? Are they using acoustics sensors? Are they using visual sensors or anything like that?
All of the above. We've approved waivers with radars, visual, acoustic systems, combinations of all of the above. All of the mitigations for infrastructure inspection and beyond visual line of sight. We'll take all of these into effect. And some of them are pretty creative. I mean, and I know you're saying go out and look and maybe talk to somebody, and that's fine. And you can do that. It's really easy to get a 107.31 waiver. You just answer the questions, as plainly as possible, but straight to the point, answer the questions. and it's real easy. Makes it real easy on us when you answer all those questions, and it's nothing complicated.
What do you do if you sense that somebody has just copied and pasted somebody else's application? I know that doesn't happen.
Well, it does happen. We've seen it a lot. You know, once you see one copy and you're like, okay, well, but then when you see repetitive, you have to throw the flag and go, hold on a minute here. You know, you can't possibly think that you actually know it. And we called them and talked to people on the phone and asked them about it. And they just admit, you know, hey, we just copied and pasted and sent it in, and they don't realize what they've written, because a lot of times what they wrote doesn't correlate to what they want.
Right.
And but that's, you know, it's okay. You know, we explain it to them, and we try to educate them on what they're doing, and they usually, you know, send us something else and explain exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
So John, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So doesn't this obstruction shielding waiver in somewhat resemble the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver that we have?
It does and it doesn't. You know, I always come back to, you're either a visual line of sight or you're not, right? And tactical beyond visual line of sight is something that was designed for public aircraft operators under Part 91. So that was a waiver issued under the COAs. It was an amendment to COAs. That's really a Part 91 waiver, but you strip it all away, Charles, it's a beyond visual line of sight. It's a waiver to visual line of sight. And that, so under Part 91, the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver is essentially a waiver to 91-113B.
No, but what I was really getting at is, does this allow for the same kind of capability to fly under Part 107?
I think it could allow even greater capability, frankly, because and Chris, maybe you can talk about some of the power companies, some of the longer range ones. You know, so the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver that Charles is referring to is an amendment to an existing public aircraft COA that allows you to go out a certain distance and a certain altitude, and you're restricted. I believe it's 1,500 feet max, right? So under the waiver, under this waiver to 107.31 using obstruction shielding, there's a little bit more flexibility on that. And I don't know, Chris, if you can comment, or you feel comfortable commenting on how far out have some of these been issued, and to who? Because I think to who is, you're not going to get this blanket go out 55 miles in any direction. It's not going to happen, right? If you have a very specific. So Chris, maybe you can comment on that.
We have given out, I've given out a beyond visual line of sight shielded waiver, no VOs, out to 2 miles. So that's.
And what kind of entity got that?
And that was Florida Power and Light, and that was for power line inspection.
Right.
And
so a specific use case.
Yeah, it took a while to get. I'm not gonna, get around about it. It took a while to get because we weren't there yet. But now that we are, we went ahead and issued that specific waiver to do that. A lot of the shielded waiver stuff that we have now is usually localized in a controlled access area, is what they're basically using it for. A lot of people haven't got on board with doing a lot of linear infrastructure yet. We do have a couple entities out there that are looking at power lines and that are remaining within 50 feet of the power line.
And I guess my question is similarly, as you know, John, a lot of departments on the West Coast, moreover than not, law enforcement have got Part 107 only. They just haven't gone after the COAs. Can this be a substitution for Part 107s to be able to go ahead and say, let's just use the same thing. We want to be able to fly 1,500 feet beyond visual line of sight for fires and emergency situations. Could that be?
What you're asking for is simply a waiver to 107.31, right? Of course you could. I mean, to me,
exactly.
It's even simpler. But I mean, Charles will tell you that I'm a big advocate of fly under Part 107, keep your life simple, right? Because if you fly as a public aircraft, not every mission you fly is allowed to be is considered a public aircraft mission, and the FAA would deem it a civil operation, which is Part 107. So, and when you fly under as a public aircraft, you're flying under Part 91. So you have two sets of rules you got to know, and so yes, the Part 107, this obstruction shielding subset of 107.31 essentially gives you the same thing that the public aircraft folks had with their tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, and may even get you more.
Yeah, I'm just trying to follow your gospel.
I'm a big proponent of keep it simple. 107, you don't have pilot record database reporting either, so.
Or monthly reports.
Or monthly reports, and you have different set of criteria for incident and accident reporting. And, I'm just not that smart. So I like knowing one set of rules, not two sets. But yeah, great question. So yeah, it gives you at least the same. Well, it depends on what you ask for, right? So, and again, right, this is part of the point that Chris is making, is that answer those questions and tell us what you really want to do, and don't ask for the moon. But if you have a specific use case, design, frame your con ops and your answers around that specific use case, and you'll probably enhance your likelihood of getting a yes.
Yeah, so there's a question here for Chris that says, when you get a chance, from John McGraw, could you take a look at our CAPS filing and the 7711-2 form that he submitted for his agency?
Yeah, what is it, CAPS file?
Yeah, see, Chris is Chris is not involved with public aircraft stuff. So when you talk about CAPS, you're talking about public aircraft COAs. So that's another group who looks at those. But
yeah, so maybe we'll get Steve Pansky involved. He's off somewhere on a ship on vacation, and he wouldn't come on. I tried to get him on from the ship. I said, "You have internet, right?" He said, "Yeah, but not going to do that."
Yeah, exactly.
So I tried. So we'll get that question back to Steve Pansky and Mike O'Shea. They can help.
Yeah,
go through that.
Yeah, and I saw why is a COA only valid for 2 years? I think those are the old COAs. But I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% certain, but I think COAs now are being written for longer periods of time. And the COAs, I'm going to say it again, you got to read your COA, because the COAs have evolved over time. And just because Sheriff Jones has something in their COA doesn't mean you've got it in your COA. And just because you got something in your COA doesn't mean they've got it in their COA. So you really, word to the wise, read your COA, and the COAs, I think, are the new ones. I think are being issued for longer. But we'll get back to Charles on that. We'll take it.
I see there was another question about 4 years. We have a standard for all of our waivers that we write, except for the altitude waivers. They're good for 4 years. That's just typical policy for Part 107 waivers. Great point. And Spencer asks a great question too. Hey, are these location specific or are they Class G anywhere? And I think the answer is depends. Depends on what you ask for. So exactly. That was gonna be my answer.
Yeah.
If you want it for a large, broad area, what we typically ask for is some explanation and some mitigations on what you're going to do in specific situations.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and we call these performance-based waivers, where we have some people that say we're not going to operate within 3 miles of any airport, or 5 miles within 5 miles from it, like a DFW or Atlanta International Airport. And so what we do is we look at all of those particular mitigations and allow, and make sure that they understand what they're asking for and what they're receiving. So there has to be some restraining there about what you're doing. It's just not a willy-nilly operation. So there needs to be some foresight on that.
Yep.
Yeah. And as an example, the Department of Transportation in Massachusetts, they're going to get a waiver for the entire state just to look for vegetation across the rail lines. So what they're doing is they're looking at all of their rail lines. They're looking, okay, what kind of situations do we have How close are airports to where we're gonna look? What are we gonna do about those? So they're answering all of these questions, but they're basically gonna get the same waiver, the same shielding waiver for that. And so that's what I mean by looking at your situation, what you're gonna use it in, the mitigations that you're going to put forth to ensure safety.
So, and these waivers are not necessarily geographic specific, is that correct?
No, we have some that are nationwide.
Okay.
We have some companies that have put together a performance-based list of what they're looking for, where they can operate, but we're not restricting them nationwide. Except, you know, there's always the blurb in there that says, hey, if you're operating in an you know, class A, B, C, or D or E area, you've got to get special priority or special permission, maybe from Myrna or someplace that somebody else to operate in that particular area. But in a standard class G area, we're okay with that.
Yeah, one of the questions comes in, I think it, and I think this is where you know, John Meehan's Dr. No comes in, right? Can John Q. Public or Public Safety see the mitigations that an applicant says they're going to use? Can that be made public, or is that proprietary, Chris?
We don't make a person's application is proprietary. That's kind of how we treat that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of it also, some of it is very sensitive of what they're proposing to do.
Right. And you know, we've had people ask us, and we like, that's something that you have to figure out. You've got to figure out how. I can't tell you how to do it. You've got to come to me and tell me how you're going to.
Yeah, I had another great question. It's a perfect opportunity for me to, it's about operations over people and what typical mitigations are being used. And I before I punt that over to Chris to see if he even wants to tackle it, but remember that 107 was amended last April to allow for routine operations over people, but you need to have a category approved drone. And right now there's only category 3 drones that are on the FAA accepted list. We don't see too many, we haven't seen any category 2 applications by manufacturers from what I understand. So that would be a good question for you to ask your manufacturers. Hey, how come you're not submitting category 2 drones? So 107 was amended so that you wouldn't need a waiver to do that. Now, that being said, right, you can fly over people right now with a category 1 drone under Part 107. You can't do sustained operations unless you get remote ID. That's a whole nother subject, but you could fly over people right now under 107 with a category 1 drone. If you can also apply for a waiver under 107.39. I don't know, Chris, are you comfortable with talking about any recent waivers you've seen to 107.39 and what people have proposed in general terms?
Yeah. You know, we did away with the waivers for a while because we came out with the rule. And then we're starting to allow waivers again. With there, you know, situations with parachutes, there's a lot of different things that were out there before in the realm that in which we gave waivers for, and the reasons we gave waivers for them. We're starting to re-accept those particular mitigations again. The typical answer is don't operate over people. And if you do, you need a waiver. So, you know, and we're not going to give a waiver. Here's another one is we're not going to give a waiver for just in case. Just I'm flying along and somebody steps out in front of me. Do I need a waiver? Well, the intent was not to fly over a person. You can't help somebody walking out in front of, you know, underneath your drone. We're not going to go through hundreds of hours of manpower just to violate you for accidentally flying over a person. And we have to be real about that. If the intent was not to fly over people, then don't fly over people.
Right. And you know, that these things do
look at it.
And remember, you've always got the ace up your sleeve if it's a real emergency and you cannot comply with 107, make the phone call to Myrna and the SOSC. And they are authorized to give a temporary emergency waiver or an airspace authorization for a real live emergency, right? So, and to Chris's point, if you're doing a traffic investigation or something and don't fly over people, right? Because they can hurt somebody. There's been 2 people killed in the UK by drones. So it's no joke, right? And they do pose risk. Do you really have to fly over people? Okay, you really do. Okay, it's an emergency. Okay, make the phone call or go through the process and apply following the waiver safety explanation guidelines under 107.39 and do it that way. Great question. Charles, I don't see any more questions. Anything else you want to talk about?
Let me just make sure. No, I think we've covered all the questions so far. And there's some things in the chat that we'll be getting into the next topic.
Okay. And now's a good time. I can hand it over to you, or there's a couple things I wanted to point out about remote ID. So remember that remote ID is effective for all operators essentially as of September 16th. The way I remember it is Suite 16, September 16th of 2023. If you intend to go beyond visual line of sight, you need standard remote ID, not broadcast, but standard. And there are about 6 or 7 pages worth of FAA accepted declarations of compliance of current drones that are accepted for remote ID right now. And a lot of the new ones, the older ones don't seem to be going through that process, but take a look at that. Want to make you all aware of that.
If they don't know, is that something they can ask the manufacturers, or is there a place to look?
Yes, they should add. Well, first you go to the FAA website. You ask your manufacturer is always a good one, and they should be able to tell you if it's remote ID accepted by the FAA and where to find that. What's interesting is we've done a few experiments with some drone pros and some colleagues, and it's not, in many cases, it's not on the drone. It's on your handheld controller in many cases, but even then it's sometimes hard to find. The rule requires you to have your remote ID serial number updated into your drone registration on the FAA drone zone by September 16th, or you're technically not in compliance after that. And they're looking at policy about can anyone opt out of RID. That's being looked at. There's no decision today. So as of today, law enforcement is not exempt from that. So I think we've covered the FAA part of it, Charles. If you've got, I think you wanted to talk about a couple of topics as well. So I'll pass the baton to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of cover some things that are FAA related, but I'm not the FAA, so I'm giving the information as I understand it. The first we'll talk about is the Drone as a First Responder template, or the FR-BVLOS waiver that's now out that people are using for Drone as a First Responder. We have been working on that over the past year with the FAA, with a working group, the Drone Responders National Working Group. If you're interested in being involved in that, send me an email. My address is charles@droneresponders.org. From that, we have put an entire DFR folder and subfolders in the droneresponders.org website. Again, I would urge everyone to join. Membership is free. You also get the blogs that tell you the latest things that come out with what we've been working on, what we are working on, and the new developments. So I put a copy of the FR-BVLOS template, which is now for your 91.113 waiver beyond visual line of sight DFR. And the purpose of that is basically it says that you're going to comply with the following rules. And it goes through, and you look at that form. Like I said, the link is in there. I'm not going to go into detail because you can look at it yourself. You do not have to do your ConOps in this particular document because it's basically check boxes to send in. And then again, on our website, if you go to the blog under news blog under our listings, you'll see some additional instructions which tell you that you don't have to do ConOps in this particular document, but you still need to put your ConOps in your COA application. And in order for you to get the 91.113, you already have to have a COA approved. Now that can be a blanket COA, it can be a jurisdictional COA, and then you have to amend that COA after the 91.113 waiver is approved. So that's different. And what we're seeing is the 91.113 waivers are now being, for DFR, are now being approved within days. So that's a change. That's a major change over what we've seen in the past. One question I had was the form set that I put out there, which is the FR-BVLOS waiver. The first responder must have held a Part 91 certificate COA. Yes, you have to have a COA first. That's just the necessary step for that. And then I've got, is there any benefit of adding an FR-BVLOS to a COA if a COA has a T-BVLOS? Well, they're two different things. The tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver is a very temporary, short-lived, and very narrow distance, 1,500 feet, of being able to fly beyond visual line of sight. So the FR-BVLOS is designed for those that want to do drone as a first responder. If you don't know what that is, it's when a drone is launched from dispatch to fly over the scene, and depending on what's in the waiver and the COA, the distance has been lately 2 miles, as long as you have a 2-mile bubble visibility around that. And I will just go back and reaffirm to that discussion that when you're doing that, it means you have to be able to see it from the time that it takes off until the time it flies over the area that it's going and come back. There's not a breakup or a fraction or anything. And in most cases, the people are seeing to achieve that, they have to have somebody at a high elevation, usually on a rooftop, which gives you that visibility over the area that you're going to be flying in. You got anything to add to that, John?
No, I think you covered it pretty darn well, Charles. We might be looking for people at the FAA with your skill set.
Yeah. I'll just stay out here and just keep pushing. So then let's go into the latest thing that's happened with the drones as first responder with some of the technology enhancements. And we're talking about Pearland, Texas. And let me pull up some information here that's in front of me.
And I'm answering a few questions while you're talking. So
okay. In Pearland, Texas, Brandon Carr, who was with the Pearland, Texas Police Department at the time, was working through his COA for 91.113 and a DFR waiver that would utilize technology and eliminate the need for visual observers. I think all of us know that visual observers and the efficiency of visual observers can be somewhat questionable as far as the distance they can actually see, as far as being distracted and other things. So what we also see is that drones as first responder is limited in the number of people that are applying for it, because they have typically had to have people or pilots on a roof to watch the flights. That becomes a tremendous expense. And in areas where weather is not very friendly, like in some of the places in Texas where you may have 100+ temperatures, having a pilot on the roof is not feasible. So they worked with Iris Automation, and they installed the Cassia G. And basically what this DFR allows for rapid response. It gives increased safety because we have better situational awareness, and it becomes much more cost effective. The Cassia G is set up such that it's a node, it can do that. But what you need to understand about Pearland, Texas is it's not one thing. It's a combination of things. It's a system of systems that are part of what's allowed Pearland to go forward. So it's a combination of the Iris Cassia G. It's using White Fox technology to identify other objects in the area, and ADS-B in. So it's a combination of all those three factors of being able to understand what the airspace is. Personally, I think this is a great advancement of moving forward, being able to use technology to do something much more reliable than what the visual eye can do. And the other part about this is right now is this the FAA worked really hard on getting to a yes. And what that means is they're working with Pearland, Texas to kind of be that validation case, to monitor and to validate the information that's coming in so that it is actually performing as such. But then I wanted to go on and add that one of the things that also has been done is Iris went to the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, which is the Virginia test site for the FAA, and said, hey, we want you to do some really specific testing on our equipment to validate that it can do what it says it can do. And I think I've got some information here that says what they looked at. Yeah, it says the previous testing resulted in an average detection range of 2016 meters with a 318 meter standard deviation and a 97.9% rate of detection. And then I think the MAPS was a little bit different than that, but it was within 10%. And they basically validated that the information that came from the Cassia G and the previous test were reasonable and very close to being similar. So I wanted to put that out there so that people know the FAA is looking specifically at how they can move technology forward, but there's got to be data and the analysis and be able to provide that. So we have, and I have reached out to Steve Pansky and said, could we put another bubble on the FR-BVLOS waiver that says that you're using technology to create a digital observer in place of the normal visual observers. But that again would be something that would be already agreed upon or accepted by the FAA. So it's a lot of this stuff is still going to be coming forward, but I think this is an exciting advancement. And I can tell you, visual observers, yeah, I'm always leery because it's easy to get distracted, and for longer flights, there's a lot of things out there in the sky that are more interesting than nothing in the sky. So I'll leave it with that, and let's see if I've got any more questions here. Are there examples of waivers? The waivers, there are examples within the Drone as a First Responder website in the Resource Center under Drone as a First Responder. Let's see.
They can also go to Part 107 waivers issued, and in the search box, type in 107.39 and see what people got waiver to ops over people, and 107.31 for VLOS, et cetera.
Yeah, and then I've got one question: can we update the webinars? Yes, we'll be putting a list out and updating. We have, if you're a member of Drone Responders, you can go to the blog under News Blog, and you can go down through the list. You can see previous webinars and recordings that are out there as well. And then anything else here?
I think we got them.
Yeah, I think we got everything covered. So I guess with that, we can leave it open for if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, and we'll give that a couple of minutes. And
I don't
confirm I've got one here.
yeah.
Can you confirm the system used at Parallel as White
Yeah,
Fox?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's White Fox Technology, or I think it's whitefox.com. You can look it up. But it was the combination of systems. So that's that. I can't really go into the details about the technology itself. Done. Okay, and then we saw here a note that said that they got a COA issued in February, and it was for 2 years only, just for your information.
Version of a FRIA for training purposes. That's an interesting one. I would look at Advisory Circular AC 89-3. Now I don't think we've issued any FRIAs right now. That won't really happen until we get closer towards the 16th of September. A FRIA essentially is a field. It's two dimensions. It's a spot and a distance. That's all a FRIA is. They still have to fly below 400 feet. Still have to keep it visual line of sight. The only that radius from that spot is where they're allowed to fly the drone without remote ID. So I'm not sure if there's much training other than that's a spot where they're allowed to be.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, Rob, is there something more specific? In most cases, unless you have airspace restrictions, you can train just about anywhere, especially we have
we have seen some FRIA applications come in from law enforcement. They're not eligible to ask for it. That's community-based organizations, schools. So don't ask for a FRIA if you're on this webinar.
Yeah. And again,
but you can fly in a FRIA to go do your training. So you could go over to the school, but is your drone really useful? Since you couldn't technically use it outside the FRIA for anything after the 16th of September?
Yeah, I guess that's the question is what's the purpose or the question of why you want to use a FRIA? Is it because you want to use it because you don't have remote ID on
Yeah,
on the
that
equipment?
isn't, yeah, that won't be a solution for you because then you may as well just use the drone inside. No, I think that I'm interpreting the question as, hey, if our folks see somebody flying, how do they know? And we'll work with LEAP. We'll work with our LEAP team on how to help the first responders understand what a FRIA is and that sort of thing. But I guess for this community, if you're thinking that the FRIA is going to get you out of their RID, get that out of your head. In my opinion, sorry, Dr. No.
You're living up to your
I'm
reputation.
just looking out for him, Charles. You know that. You know that. I'm just looking out for him.
Yeah, and if you're also in the chat or in the question area, the John McGraw posted the whitefoxdefense.com website for that technology, and so did Adam.
You know, I do think now's a good time to start thinking about your budgets for September 16th.
Yeah, and then Rob says he wants to teach new pilots how to fly on old aircraft. This would be extremely helpful. RID would be cost prohibitive to outfit the entire fleet.
Yep, that's a great point. You could definitely go over to some FRIA and do it in that location. Absolutely.
And you might want to mention that just because you outfit it with remote ID, I hate to do this to you, John, but just because you outfit it with remote ID doesn't mean it's compliant. Typically, if you're outfitting your drone with remote ID, it's not considered standard. It's just remote ID.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a few minutes here. So there's two kinds of remote ID. Essentially, there's standard and there's broadcast module. Broadcast module is basically a bolt-on aftermarket. You bolt it on, Velcro it to your drone that has certain kinds of information. If you every drone that operates in the NAS, so you could take your old Phantom, for example, bolt one of these on. The limitation is you can't use it beyond visual line of sight if it has broadcast. If you want to go beyond visual line of sight, according to the rule, you need standard, which is incorporated in the drone. And to Chris's point, if it's not on that FAA list, it's not compliant in our eyes. So check that list, and I'll get Charles the website where you can do it. I mean, if you got a minute, I could show you what it looks like. Do we have time, Charles?
Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen here for a second after I get it pulled up. Yep, here it is. I'm not able to share my screen. Huh.
Hold on a second. I thought I had you on there already. Where are you? There you go.
All right. Yep. All right. So this is what it looks like. This is where you find it. So this is it's uasdoc.faa.gov. That's where you're going to find it. And you're going to go to this view public DOC list. You're going to look there. You're going to click on that. And that, by the way, that doesn't mean public aircraft. That just means like the viewing public. That's what they mean here. God bless our engineers.
And you don't have to log in.
Right. You can just click on that. It'll take you to this page. You want to filter. You could filter by OOP, operations over people. That's where you're going to see if your drone is accepted by the FAA as category compliant for ops over people. And you'll see, for example, there's a number of XBs in there. But if you want to filter by RID, or you can search for your particular maker model, and that's going to bring you to this page. And so I filtered by RID, and you can see down here, there's 9 pages worth of drones that are on this list, and it's updated constantly, and that list will grow. There's a lot of different products that are on there. And you'll see a lot of DJI products. Not all DJI products are on there, so you'd have to look at that. And how do you detect it? You know, if we got a little bit of time, right? The market's got some solutions that are coming out. These are the compliance dates. The Sweet 16 there, right? September 16th, the middle one here. You're required to have your drone serial number updated by that time, but this is where you're going to find it right here. That's where you're going to find it.
And this video is recorded and will be available afterwards. So the information that you're seeing here, you don't need to actually capture really quickly. You can look at the video recording following.
All right.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. So I appreciate all of you being on today. Chris, thanks for being here. John, thanks for stepping in for Mike O'Shea.
My pleasure. Thanks to Myrna and Mike as well. I saw she had to drop, but we're here for y'all.
And thank you all for everything you do for us in public safety. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thanks to all of you for that. All right.
All right, everybody, we'll see you next month. Remember, second Wednesday of the month is our FAA webinar with Mike O'Shea, and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every month, same time, same place, same bat channel.
Bye
See you
now.
next time.